All right, Kevin, you touched upon this indirectly in the previous part. Now, this one well-respected member of the bookmaking community that marked my card earlier told me that one of the things that they really respected in the trading room, that you were unafraid to finish a long and detailed article with conclusion no bet, which for a tipping column is your editors must have been quite. So I suppose that's because you were looking for value, did all the work, couldn't find it, so that was the honest answer.
I suppose so. Yeah, I'm glad to hear that somebody in a trading room felt that way. I know that not all punters and not all readers of the paper felt that way. Mark Langdon, who nowadays is our sort of head of sport on the Racing Post, or he was when I left, he used to tell a story about somebody who'd written in saying something along the lines of, if I want to hear no bet, I'll listen to my wife. You know, I don't want to hear it from Kevin Pullin. Yeah, I think some people in the trading rooms understood. I'm glad and very appreciative that my editors on the Sporting Life and on the Racing Post, principally Bruce Millington, did so as well. In later years, I would say that really happened much less often, because in later years I wasn't writing every single day. So when I did write, I would have to come up with a tip. But in the early times, I was in the paper pretty much every day. And the way I've always gone about things is I want to start with what I think the price should be. So in one way or another, and with me it was through my ratings, I would come up with an idea of what the price should be, and then I would look at what the bookmakers were offering. So if I happened to look and they were offering the prices that were where I thought they should be, you know, what was I to do? I became acquainted quite early with this idea of value, and I'm very pleased that I learned that so early. You know, I came to understand that you can be lucky, but over time your best reasonable hope of making a profit is to bet on things that are more likely to occur than the odds suggest. I used to work out, therefore, what I thought the odds should be, and if the bookmakers were saying the same, in some ways I took that as a compliment, because it said to me that I wasn't entirely on the wrong track. You know, the bookmakers are successful businesses. Every year they publish their accounts and they make huge profits from bets. So they must be doing something right, and nearly all the time their prices must be right. And that's what I found. Nearly all the time I would come up with prices and it would be the same as what the bookmakers were offering. And if I was supposed to give a tip, I would think, well, what can I tip? You know, I don't know, maybe, like I said, I'm glad some traders appreciated it. I know not every single punter did, though many of them were appreciative. But I was always trying to be honest. If I couldn't do it, I wish I could have found an edge on every game. I don't think there is an edge on every game, but if there is, I can't see it. And I wanted to be honest. I might win or I might lose, or I might put this tip up and it might be good or it might be bad. But if I put it up, I think, you know, I do generally think that this is a value bet. And if I can't see it, that's why I said it, you know.
Okay, so at this point, you were backing your selections, as you mentioned in the first couple of parts.
Yeah.
I'm not convinced that the bookmakers would have been over enamoured to actually take your bets. So how did you get your bets on? Can you still get your bets on? And is it easier to get on a sports bet as opposed to your horse racing counterparts?
I don't know how difficult the racing punters find it, but I always found it really, really hard on football. And I think I had certain advantages. I didn't have that many accounts that were closed down, though I did have an account with Stan James that was closed down twice. It was closed down once, and I appealed to their PR, saying, look, I'm backing things I tip in the papers and I'm giving you publicity. Can't you get it open? And they did get open, and then a little while later it was closed again. But most of the time, what would happen is that you weren't officially closed. So the bookmaker would always say, I didn't close them down. But you were restricted to a level where your account was effectively worthless, you know. A dwindling number of bookmakers would allow me still to bet with them, I think because of that reason, because I was in the Racing Post and because I was giving them a bit of publicity. In the end, by the time I left the Racing Post, I only had one usable account in my own name.
In your own name.
which you'll be surprised to hear, which was with Bet365, and they were always very good to me. I think they did it for the publicity. You know, a lot of people say other things about Bet365.
Were you trying to get these bets on before you went to print? Were they getting their card marked?
No.
Because they might have been happy to do it if you were marking their card for them.
Oh, yeah, perhaps they would at that time, but no, absolutely not. And one of the first things I was told on the Sporting Life, when Bruce Millington moved across from the Greyhound desk to the sports desk, and everything took off and got so much bigger and better, was that our tips were for the benefit of our readers, and therefore, if we put a tip in the paper, we shouldn't back it ourselves until readers have had a chance to back it for themselves. So in those days, it meant waiting until the following morning the paper came out and everybody had a decent chance to get on. So very often you were then putting yourself in a disadvantage anyway, because what I used to find with my tips is the price wouldn't last very long anyway. So it was immaterial whether you wanted to get on or not get on, because by the time you wanted to bet, the price would be sort of gone. But no, that was you know, it was very, one of the reasons I loved being in this business at the beginning was I always thought the sort of journalism we did was the best sort of journalism. I always thought it was honest. You know, sometimes other people might think it's good or bad, or you might win or lose. Nobody on the Racing Post, nobody on the Sporting Life, nobody on the Racing Football Outlook ever told me to write something that I believed to be untrue or that they believed to be untrue. It had happened to me on other papers. And part of that moral outlook, part of that, I'm not sure I like the word moral, but part of that way of trying to do things in a good way came from Bruce, who would insist on this. No, if you put a tip, we don't want anybody backing it themselves tonight so that the price is gone in the morning. Then it's academic, why are we doing it? And I always followed that myself, yeah.
Okay, now you're constantly looking for an edge. How hard are they to find these days?
Well, I've sort of alluded to that earlier on. Harder and harder, which is why over the years, I suppose you could put it one way, I sort of tended to retreat. You know, in the early days, I would have many more tips on the actual outcome of the match, you know, and then certainly when I got onto the spreads, it was more things to do with goals and times and corners and booking. And over the years, my tipping output was sort of like a retreat from the headline markets into more and more subsidiary markets, because it was in those places that those were the only sort of places where I still felt that I could find an edge. It's very, very hard on the bigger markets. For me, maybe not for other people, but that's how it was for me. You know.
And given that you have to, you know, by the nature of the business, you have to write stuff a little bit in advance and make your decisions a little bit in advance. How often did you wake up on a Saturday morning and see that the top striker of the team you tipped up was out, and you know how often, and you wish you hadn't put the bet up at all? How often did that happen?
It didn't happen all that often. As I said, in recent years, there weren't so many of those sort of tips anyway. And probably the only time that comes into my head was a time when the bet won. Anyway, it didn't affect me too much, and one of the things that I came to believe over the years was that probably people put too much emphasis on team news. You know, when I started, people used to talk so much about team news, and I remember what, particularly when I started on the Racing Post, there was a tipster at that time who was a sort of league football tipster who was Mark Warwood, and he was very, very good, and he was a great guy, and he went off in the end. When he got married, he went off to Australia, but he was very much into team news, and this was one of the points on which I tended to disagree with him politely and quietly a little bit. He would say team news is the only edge that I've got, because in those days bookmakers were putting up prices a bit earlier, and they didn't like to change the prices on coupons. You know, it's not like it is now with everything on the internet. So he felt team news was something that happened afterwards, and it might give you an edge. And my feeling was, just because it's there, just because it's extra information that you've got, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to help you. And I didn't feel that most of the time team news was all that helpful. In extreme cases it would do. You know, in the heydays of Barcelona, if Messi wasn't playing, they were probably less likely to win. Though they were still overwhelmingly the favourites anyway. You know, but most of the time, most players and most teams, you take one out and you put another in, it's not really going to make that much difference, in my opinion.
Now, you're no longer with the Racing Post, and not currently, when we're talking, not working for doing the tipping. Given the respect you have in the industry, a paid tipping service under your own steam would surely be a lucrative road to wander down. Is it something you've considered?
It's not only something I considered; it's something that I did for a short while on the Racing Post, and they asked me to do it. They asked me to sort of set up this, they set up the service, and they asked me to sort of provide the tips. And I was hopeful that it was going to go really well, you know, and we got a great response at the beginning. I think more than 1,000 people signed on, you know, right at the start. But there were practical difficulties with it, which was that every time I put out a tip, there'd be all these great number of people at the beginning suddenly trying to get on this bet, and the bookmakers wouldn't know where the money was coming from, and the price just disappeared ridiculously straight away. If you put a tip in the paper, often the bookmakers will be aware of it and they'll know where the money's coming from, and maybe they will, maybe they won't be too much worried about you, you know, or they'll try to. Sometimes they'll try to stand it for a while, sometimes they won't. But if they suddenly get a hail of money coming mysteriously from nowhere, they say, "Oh goodness, what's going on here?" And it didn't really work, particularly in the sort of markets where I was talking about, where I might have an edge. You know, perhaps if I was tipping on the Champions League final or a Premier League game, this team to win, that team to win, or whatever, maybe you would have a better chance of the price standing up for longer. But in the more niche markets where I was going, if a bookmaker suddenly found loads of money coming in, they would just run scared. So it didn't really work out, unfortunately. That's how it was.
Okay, right, we've got a couple of minutes left. Anybody wanting to emulate your success betting on football is just starting out, getting into this wonderful world of gambling, what would be your advice with a couple of golden rules to follow?
I suppose I would say things that worked for me, and of course I'm aware that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to work for other people. But I would suggest, trying to find some little angle that you've got, something that you can do that other people can't do, and that people are going to want to know about. I guess that would be the first thing, and I said two things. Actually, I've just thought of a third, which I'll add on afterwards. The second thing would be true to yourself. Just be true to yourself, and try to see if you can find a way of doing the things you want to do, and see if there's a way where you don't have to do stuff that you don't want to do. And the last thing, the third thought that occurred to me just as I was rambling on there was, persevere as well. You know, it's not always easy to get started, you know, and I know myself how disheartening it is when you've got some ideas and you think they're good ideas, and they may well be good ideas, and you put them to people and nobody's interested in, well, sometimes they don't even, a lot of the time they don't even reply, and you just keep plugging away for as long as you can, and hopefully it'll come right for you, you know.
Fantastic. Kevin PULLEIN, thank you very much.
Thank you.